Welcome friends, enemies, and everyone in between to my channel, The Masked Mormon. I am in fact the Masked Mormon.
Why you wearing a mask? Were you burned by acid or something like that?
Oh no, it's just they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone will be wearing them in the future.
If you're returning, welcome back. But if this is your first time here, I am a Mormon who used to believe in the truth claims of the Mormon Church. I did it all. I was baptized, I went on a mission, I went to BYU, I was temple married, and all of the rest of it. I truly believed in the claims of Mormonism. Now, I explore some of the implications of Mormon theology, culture, and some of my own personal experiences and talk about it on the internet with you fine viewers. And if you haven't already, if you like what I do, please like and subscribe. A while ago, I did a video asking whether or not I thought the Mormon Church was a cult. And I went over Dr. Stephen Hassan's BITE model of authoritarian control. BITE is an acronym where each letter represents a different mode of control. B for behavior control, I for information control, T for thought control, and E for emotional control. Organizations that encompass these traits are not necessarily cults, but are certainly authoritarian groups. It can be really hard to nail down what a cult actually is. Often, what is considered a cult is a subjective value call. And it can, of course, be a continuum. There are some organizations that may score highly on all sorts of metrics that may be used to try to classify cults. Yet, they are largely benign. On the other hand, there are others that are destructive. Cults can at times be used as a pejorative that is used to denounce a group that is unliked by another group. That is where Steve Hassan and others have tried to better codify and define what a cult is on the spectrum of authoritarian control. Sometimes what a cult is very clear, like the Branch Davidians or Jim Jones's People's Temple. Other times, it can be a little bit more ambiguous. In my video on whether or not the Mormon Church is a cult, I came down on the side of definitely, maybe. The Brighamite sect of Mormonism scores pretty highly using the BITE model. The church exerts control in all of the modes. Yet, I couldn't go full in on classifying the church as definitely a cult. And don't get me wrong, I totally understand those that consider it a cult. But I also see that it can be a little bit more nuanced than that. Mormonism can be a stabilizing force in someone's life. It can provide answers to some of life's deepest questions, and it can provide someone with a sense of fulfillment and community. On the other hand, it can ruin someone's life if they don't fit into the Mormon mold, as it were. They can chafe under Mormonism's structure. They can pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to the church's tithing, while not having enough money to care for themselves. Shame can be heaped upon them as they try to live up to Mormonism's impossibly high demands. Mormonism may or may not actually be a cult, but it is definitely a high-demand religion, and it is an authoritarian system. Its philosophy controls people's behavior, the information that is available to its members, the thoughts that they are to have, and their emotions. Any believers who disagree can look at the BITE model breakdown, and if they honestly assess each of the modes of mind control, they will have to come to the conclusion that the church is at the very least an authoritarian system. That said, whether or not the church is a cult is not the topic of this video. No, I am talking about whether Mormon missions are cults. That's why I'm all dressed up now. I've got my name tag. This is actually one of my name tags for my own mission. And then I realized as I was getting ready to record this video, I no longer own the standard missionary uniform. I no longer own any white shirts. So I'm coming to you dressed kind of as a missionary with my name tag, my tie, but no white shirt. Sorry. I served a mission from 2003 to 2005 in Cincinnati, Ohio. I didn't originally want to serve a mission. I got baptized when I was 16. Now this was a whole new world, and it seemed like I was barely dry and everyone was asking if I was going to go on a mission. Look, I was barely even a member in this alien world, and you're asking me to give up 2 years of my life to talk about something I hardly know anything about? I figured that since I was a recent convert, I was exempt from the expectation to go on a mission. But I was sorely disappointed to find out that no one else saw that the same way. Especially when I went to BYU. The pressure to go on a mission was turned up to 11, and I resisted for a long time. But it was hard. I was, and actually kind of am, girl crazy. And no one would date me because I wasn't a return missionary, and because I wasn't planning on becoming one. I made it to my junior year of university when I did finally choose to go. I can probably attribute part of that to my wife, the masked mistress. You see, I had met her and we had become really good friends, and I felt hard for her. But she was planning on going on a mission herself. So I made a deal with God that I would go on a mission if He would help me get together with her, preserving her agency, of course. So I went, and to be fair and forthright, my mission wasn't a terrible experience. Because I was a little older, I went with a bit more maturity than some of the other missionaries. I got along with almost everyone. I did have a companion that I thought would knife me in my sleep, and I did deal with a bout of depression when I was with another companion, because I think he was also depressed, and it made for a very difficult several weeks. I had 2 mission presidents, and I loved them both. They were both good men in very different ways. President number 1 was a university vice president in Utah. He was, in some ways, a little bit more informal. The culture that grew out of his presidency included a mission song, and his favorite hymn was "In Our Lovely Deseret." If you've never had the privilege, ignominy of singing this song, you should check it out. And I hate this song, but he did make it a little bit fun. He was my president for only about 9 months. President number 2 was the president of a medical company before he was called as a mission president. He brought an air of business professionalism to the mission. Gone were the things that made us look like college students. Titles were very important. Exact obedience and quiet dignity were the rule. I don't know if that word, quiet dignity, brings back any memories for any of you. That said, he wasn't a tyrant. He was a very loving man, and I had the opportunity to work closely to him for the rest of my mission. I know that some people have monsters as mission presidents, but mine I still hold in high regard. So, what I'm going to be saying isn't an indictment against them, but this is evaluating the mission program itself. Is a Mormon mission a cult? Well, let's check it out. Because I started talking about mission presidents, let's start there. A mission president really sets the tone of a mission. He forms a culture. A new language forms based on his preferences. For instance, in my case, President number 2 didn't like certain overused words, like awesome, or he didn't like the overuse of acronyms that seem to be prevalent in Mormonism. Instead of saying the word P-Day, we were instead to say Preparation Day, Zone Leader instead of ZL, things like that. Because a mission president sets the tone of the mission, he can turn it into anything. Especially since this tone setting is coupled with the overarching church belief that these men are called by God and have special gifts bestowed upon them by God. And because of that, the things he says or the rules that he sets are seen by the missionaries as the same thing that God or Jesus would do. This is an environment that is ripe for abuse. I just started watching a Netflix documentary series called How to Start a Cult, and it opens with a general definition of a cult as a system of religious veneration directed at a particular person or object. Often, this is centered on a charismatic, often autocratic figure, often involving an element of mind control and suppression of free thought. In a mission, the president is the central figure. True, the general authorities are the rock stars of the mission world. But the mission president is the ever-present authority in the lives of the missionaries. They are to write to him weekly, and at least every 6 weeks they meet with him in conferences, trainings, and in one-on-one interviews. Most missionaries will see their mission president as a spiritual giant. If he is an egomaniac, the culture of the mission can reflect that. Ultimately, the mission president is the leader of a cult. The buck stops with him. His missionaries will usually be fiercely loyal to him. For instance, my companion and I were sent on a special assignment into the neighboring mission to get something for President number 2. When we arrived at the mission office, we met our missionary counterparts and the mission president. It was very obvious the difference in mission culture. My companion and I walked in with our suit jackets on, just like President number 2 liked, with an air of formality, which this president and his assistants picked up on right away. The president commented that perhaps he should institute a similar set of rules for his missionaries, and the assistants immediately tried to dissuade him from that. It's like, no, president, you don't want to start doing that. And to be honest, it stroked our egos a little bit. Our president was so much better. Missionaries will often believe that their president is going to be the next general authority. Because the president is given such a high degree of autonomy and latitude from Salt Lake, he gets to define extra rules beyond the general rules. For instance, in my mission, the types of music we could listen to were pretty limited. Hymns, EFY, Christian rock, stuff like that. But when President number 2 came in, the music rule became much more restrictive. The only thing we could listen to were church hymns as sung by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or, as it's now known, the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. Also, besides the scriptures and Preach My Gospel and church magazines, we were limited to reading the 4 or 5 books in the missionary library. Any other books were to be sent home immediately. We were forbidden from reading anything else, even if it was by the church. I remember that I had a copy of the U.S. Constitution and Declaration of Independence that I always carried around in my scripture case. And I handed that over to President number 2 so I could comply with his rule. Come to think of it, I don't think I ever got that back. Some mission presidents will have missionaries wake up earlier than normal for extra study. They will ban certain articles of clothing. Some will even berate missionaries for assumed failings, or otherwise make the lives of missionaries a living hell, or more so than a mission already can be. A mission can be a pressure cooker, where the expectations of perfection can really grind someone down. Guilt can be heaped on them for not following the rules exactly. If you don't wake up exactly at 6:30, God won't bless you that day. Don't get out of the apartment on time, your teaching appointments will all fall through. Need to take a little time to yourself? You're wasting the Lord's time, and you need to repent. If you are a 19 to 20-something young man with hormones and desires, so you rub one out in the shower as a stress reliever, you just broke the law of chastity, and the Holy Ghost leaves you, and you need to repent. You got a little frisky with your girlfriend or boyfriend before your mission, and forgot to tell your bishop about it, you can be sent home dishonorably. If you don't follow the mission rules exactly, you will be under Satan's power, and God won't let you teach his people. Exact obedience is the rule. which can end up being confusing, especially if there are missionaries that are more laid back or don't follow the rules exactly, and they end up seeing more success than their super strict counterparts. All while not realizing that sincerity and authenticity are what connect people together, and not following a strict set of rules. Understandably, an air of, let's call it superstition, permeates a mission. That, on top of a climate of constant surveillance, feeling like you're constantly being watched by an exacting God, actually being constantly watched by your companion, obliquely being watched by your mission leadership, including the president, and then self-surveillance that missionaries heap on themselves. It's easy for a missionary to forget that they're volunteers. The cultural pressure that's heaped on a missionary from the time that they are children, and the immense pressure that's heaped on them as they wear the name tag, can make them forget that they're there, supposedly, willingly. If they leave their missions early, then there are social sanctions levied against the early return missionary, independent of the reason that they returned. It's almost always assumed it's because of some sexual indiscretion. The life of a missionary can also be very hard, and at times dangerous. Missionaries will often be placed in areas that lack resources or are prone to violence. Gang violence is something that missionaries can be exposed to. They can also be placed in housing that is substandard. Housing that's infested with pests, or without beds, or any number of substandard living conditions, especially in the light of how much money the church has. The missionary themselves pays for their own mission, about $10,000 to $15,000. And each month, the missionary is given a monthly amount to cover their food and supplies. Now, if I remember right, I received between, $130 and $140 a month. Fortunately for me, we were fed by members a lot, and so our money was able to last for the entire month. In fact, I think I had some extra. But this isn't always the case. Sometimes missionaries run out of money before the end of the month. And as a side note, if you have a missionary out, consider sending them a credit card or a debit card so that they can purchase things if they do run out of money. That said, in some areas, missionaries don't receive much member support, and thus their funds don't last very long, and they're forced to resort to eating low-quality food, or at times, not at all. That doesn't even cover feminine hygiene needs that the sister missionaries have. In poorer nations, missionary malnutrition isn't a rare thing. Also, it isn't uncommon for a missionary to have to deal with an infestation of parasites. If a missionary is injured or gets sick on their mission, the church doesn't take care of them. Even in the United States, any healthcare needs must be brought to their mission president or his wife first. There are so many stories of missionaries having to wait to receive medical care. Sometimes they experience permanent injury for easily treated issues. There have been times that missionaries have died without adequate medical care. I remember one time I got sick on my mission. I must have had some sort of bronchial infection. I was running a fever of 104 degrees for days, and I was told by my mission president's wife to get some rest. I could barely walk. I couldn't leave the apartment for 2 weeks. Now, as a missionary, this is terrible because there's nothing to do in the apartment, so you are terribly bored. I had a terrible cough and I had barely any energy. And I probably took way too much cold medicine. I probably combined things that shouldn't be combined. And I should have gone to a doctor and gotten a prescription. But the church doesn't want to spend money on the missionaries. So they're left without adequate care. As mired in controversy as it is, in the United States, the VA ultimately takes better care of veterans than the church takes care of its missionaries. If you are sick, injured, assaulted, or unalived, the church would rather send you home so your tithe-paying parents can take care of you at their own expense. But I have been sharing more anecdotes from my own mission experience and from others. that I know of. Now let's look at some of the main aspects of a mission that lean me towards characterizing it as a cult. The rules. It is well known that missionaries are expected to strictly keep a huge list of rules, some of them written, others passed down from their mission presidents. And these rules govern every aspect of a missionary's life. Let's go through some of these rules and examine them in relation to the bite model. This is the Missionary Handbook. It's also known as the White Bible. It is a short list of rules that every missionary is given when they enter the missionary training center. And we were expected to read from it every day, usually when my companion and I were studying together in the morning. And when we finished, we would start back at the beginning and go through it all again. In fact, I still have a bookmark of where I finished up the last time I read this before I left my mission. Looks like I ended on page 52. As you can see, I decorated mine. Besides Star Trek, I do have a thing for Superman. Also, members would often take us out to dinner, more than a few times at Chinese buffets, and I had this habit of collecting fortunes from the fortune cookies. Let's see here, what were some of them that said? Fortune cookie says, "Your warmth radiates onto all others around you." Let's see here, "Your lover will never wish to leave." Well, that's comforting. I also have this interesting sticker from Buffalo Wild Wings here too. Let's see here, "If brains were rain, you'd be a desert." There aren't many ways for a person to express themselves on their mission. You wear the same uniform as everyone else. Besides your tie, one of the few things you can do is decorate some of the things that you have with you all the time. So what does this thing actually say? If you have a more up-to-date version, let me know what some of the differences are down in the comments. I'm only going to go over some of the parts that I feel fit into the segments of the bite model. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Now, the first few pages cover a missionary's purpose, how to proselyte, and the structure of mission leadership. It's a mix of advice to help keep a missionary safe, or is it more of a cover your ass for the church? Maybe a little bit of both. And rules to govern every aspect of a missionary's life. So, finally, let's get to it before I ramble on more and more than I already have. The B in bite model stands for behavior. Let's start on page 13. This is entitled Missionary Conduct. As missionaries, you are expected to maintain the highest standards of conduct, including strict observance of the law of chastity, which forbids any sexual conduct of any kind whatsoever. Now, besides the obvious things that are often associated with the law of chastity, like actually having sex, it says any sexual conduct of any kind whatsoever. This can often be extended to refer to things like masturbation or anything like that. So oftentimes, again, you have 19 to 21-year-old young people that have a lot of hormones flowing in a high-stress environment. Sometimes they might feel the need to masturbate, and because of this, there's a huge load of guilt that often gets heaped upon them. In addition, you need to be aware that any touching of the private parts of another person, whether under or over clothing, can constitute criminal conduct. So, of course, there's pretty much anything that's written in this handbook is probably there because somebody did something. So some of this, of course, is good advice. One of the things that's not taught in the church are principles of consent. So yeah, touching somebody when they don't want to be touched. But touching somebody when they do want to be touched, again, that heaps a whole ton of guilt on somebody. To assist you to obey the law of chastity and to avoid criminal charges, you should always remain with your companion. You should never be alone with anyone else, male or female, adult or child. Of course, a missionary shouldn't be alone with a child, but there's a lot of fear that's kind of mixed in with good advice as well. If we jump ahead to page 16, it talks about dress and grooming. Again, remember, we're talking about behavior. Keep your appearance suitable for a representative of the Lord. How you look should strengthen what you say. Appropriate dress and grooming will earn the respect and trust of those with whom you work. Dress conservatively. Elders, wear white shirts and conservative ties. This is actually one of my mission ties. Wear business suits and conservative colors while proselyting into all meetings, unless you are directed otherwise by your mission president. Sisters, wear conservative colors. Skirts and dresses should cover your knees. Pantsuits and floor-length skirts and dresses are not appropriate. I understand now that sister missionaries can, in fact, wear pants. Get your hair cut regularly. Keep your hair clean and neatly combed at all times. Elders, keep your hair trimmed above the collar and ears. Extreme or bulky hairstyles are not acceptable. Shave mustaches and beards. Shave sideburns below the middle of the ear. Sisters, choose conservative hairstyles that are easily maintained. Be neat and clean. Bathe frequently. Now that's a good idea. And use deodorant. Yes. Now page 18 covers the schedule. And it covers everything from when you're supposed to wake up at 6:30, not a minute after. Then you study with your companion from 7 to 8. You eat breakfast. You have some personal study at 8:30. And then at 9:30, you're to leave the apartment. Again, not a minute later. You're supposed to proselyte until lunch, where you can take an hour to have lunch. Proselyte until dinner. And then at the end of the day at 9:30, you end proselyting, and you're supposed to be at your apartment. Again, not a minute later. Page 20 covers Sunday and holidays. Attend your regular Sunday meetings. Attend general conference, broadcasts. Let's see here. Spend as much time proselyting Saturdays and spend as much time as possible proselyting. Saturdays and Sundays and holidays are excellent for finding and teaching investigators, which I have to disagree with hardcore. Saturdays and Sundays and holidays were the most awkward time to be trying to talk to people. Knocking on their doors and disturbing them in the middle of whatever activities they have going on, or during holidays. Nobody wants to have their Thanksgiving interrupted by a couple of missionaries knocking on their door. Preparation day. So the only time you get off as a missionary is during preparation day. But it's not a whole day. It ends at 6 p.m. and you proselyte as usual after 6. You take care of your personal matters during the rest of the day. Preparation day is a break from the vigorous proselyting routine. Nevertheless, take advantage of opportunities that arise to find investigators. On preparation day, wear your regular missionary attire or other clothing more appropriate to a specific activity. Make preparation day activities productive and uplifting. Use your time wisely. So you have to study like you normally would in the morning. And then you end it with a full evening of proselyting. You use the time to do your laundry, get your hair cut, clean your apartment, wash your car, do some shopping, to write letters to your family or friends. But do not carry on any unauthorized communication by phone or letter with individuals, including members within or close to your mission boundaries. And then you can also have some recreational activities. Let's see here. You can visit museums, art galleries, things like that, but you're to avoid watching television. This might be partly on information control as well. Avoid watching television, viewing unauthorized video cassettes, and listening to the radio and unauthorized audio cassettes. So you can't listen to the radio, tapes, or whatever, back when tapes were a thing. Do not participate in or sponsor musical groups or athletic teams. Recreational activities should be safe and low risk. You're to avoid things like water sports, contact sports, winter sports, motorcycling, horseback riding, mountain climbing, riding in private boats or airplanes, handling firearms or explosives of any kind. There was a missionary on my mission who asked the president if they could go skydiving. They said there wasn't a rule in the White Handbook about skydiving. The president's like, look, Elder, how do you get there? You have to ride in an airplane. And I did break the rule on handling explosives. When I worked with the mission president for the 4th of July, I helped them with their fireworks. So with your companion, you're never to be alone. Again, that can probably go into some of the information control. Companionships generate strength and protection. Also, somebody to watch over you. Working 2 by 2 in the Lord's way can protect each other from temptation and from false accusers. If your companion is having difficulties with the work or personal matters, be sensitive to those problems and seek advice from your mission president. So if your companion is having troubles, talk to the mission president. You should be loyal to your companion. However, you must realize that any indiscretion or violation of the missionary standards may threaten his or her effectiveness and salvation. Dun dun dun. Fear. You and your companion are to sleep in the same bedroom, but not in the same bed. Don't want no hanky-panky. And you should arise and retire together each day. Do not stay up late to be alone. Never be alone or associate inappropriately, whatever that means, with anyone of the opposite sex. Flirting or dating is not tolerated. Now that one's kind of a little hard to tell sometimes, because flirting is... sometimes flirting can be pretty low-key. You're not to telephone or write to accept calls or letters from anyone of the opposite sex living within or near your mission boundaries. Jumping to page 32, be courteous and provide acts of service, provide community service as approved by your mission president. Now, oftentimes a mission can be seen by members as, offering an act of service. But ultimately, yeah, it's self-serving to the church. And I would argue whether or not it is actual service. Jump to 36 and 37. It talks about finances. Consider your support money as sacred. Budget your money carefully. Keep expenses to a minimum. Stay out of debt. Okay, that's good advice. Pay bills. Avoid wasting money on souvenirs and other unnecessary items. Again, that can go a lot of different ways, right? So now if we go to information control, go back to page 15. Read only books, magazines, and other material as authorized by the church and your mission president. Keep conversations free of debate and argument. Well, that's more thought control, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. Jumping to page 23. Letter writing. Write to your parents each week on preparation day. Limit other correspondence. Do not carry on any unauthorized communication by phone or letter with individuals within or close to your mission boundaries. Plus, you're also limited to what you're supposed to say to your parents. If terrible things are happening to you, you're usually discouraged from talking about those with them. Let's see here. Avoid watching television, viewing unauthorized video cassettes, listening to the radio and unauthorized audio cassettes. So you're kind of in a bubble, an information bubble. To 29, we have limit letter writing to family members and others at home. Do not telephone parents, relatives, or friends. In case of an emergency, contact your mission president. Now on a mission, at least when I was serving, you were allowed to contact your family twice a year, during Mother's Day and Christmas. So 4 times during your mission you got to talk with your family. Now I understand that they've changed that recently to missionaries can now call home once a week during preparation day. But again, you're in an information bubble, separated from any support system that you might have had. Take problems and questions to your mission president. Do not write directly to church headquarters or the president of the church or other general authorities. Letters from general authorities are referred back to the mission president. So if you have a problem, you really can't talk to anybody else outside of your mission. To page 35, it talks about medical care. If you become ill or involved in an accident, get help and inform your mission president. Your mission president will know of competent medical and dental resources in your area. No, he won't. Ultimately, he'll try to minimize how much exposure you have to the healthcare system. Thoughts. Back to page 15. Keep your thoughts, words, and actions in harmony with the message of the gospel. Keep conversations free of debate and argument. So thought crime is definitely a thing in a Mormon mission. Now emotions. 14. Protect yourselves from accusations. Never be separated. Keep yourself away from any sorts of things that can be construed as evil, I guess. Avoid all appearance of evil. Again, with emotions, that can fall again on the keep your conversations free of debate and argument. Bad emotions are bad and drive away the spirit. If you go to page 26, care enough for your companion to ask for help from the mission president before a problem becomes a crisis. Never associate with inappropriate with anyone of the opposite sex. Again, kind of a fear-based sort of thing. Any sort of connection with people, especially of the opposite sex on your mission, is very much a no-no. Yeah, those were the main rules that we had to live by. I'm sure some things have changed a bit since I served. What are some of the different rules that you had to observe? I have come to realize that the purpose of a missionary isn't so much to share the gospel, but to tie the missionary more firmly to the church. The missionary leaves home, a supportive structure surrounded by family and friends, and is thrust into an unknown environment. Their name is stripped away from them, as they are not supposed to refer to each other by their first names any longer. This is a high-pressure system. They are constantly told that their conduct reflects on them, the church, and on their ability to reach others with their message. They are constantly told that there are invisible forces trying to tempt them or lead them away and work against their investigators. A world of superstition develops, where any errant thought can be seen as a revelation from God or whisperings of Satan. I remember we would constantly pray over a map to know where we should go knock on doors. We would each pick a street in our minds, and if they didn't match up, we would try again, believing that God would lead us somewhere. Now, I eventually stopped doing this, realizing that it really didn't matter where we went. But the missionaries receive rejection after rejection. They encounter unfriendly people day in and day out, whether it be people who just want to be left alone or preachers that want to argue with them. They're out in the elements, lucky if someone lets them in to have a drink and get out of the hot or the cold or the inclement weather. The only support comes from the mission leadership, which is also there to berate you if you don't perform well enough. If the companionship doesn't teach enough lessons that week, they're berated. They haven't had a baptism in months. Whatever the case may be, it's obviously the missionary's fault. They didn't follow the rules exactly enough. They woke up late. They touched themselves too long in the shower. They didn't repent of something before they came out. Any lack of performance is the missionary's fault. They didn't have enough faith. The leadership is the carrot and the stick to ensure results. After 18 or 24 months of this, they then return back home to their support system, heralded as a hero, unless they were sent home early for any reason. Perhaps with a little trauma bonding with a few companions. They then reintegrate into life, having been shown how unfriendly the outside world is, and binding the returned missionaries more firmly to the church. They then get married, they have children, and the cycle continues to the next generation. A mission is a hardcore cult experience that exists to break the missionary, the same way a rider breaks a horse. The mission experience is too useful to the church. The church may be a high-demand organization, but it pales in comparison to the high demands of a mission. Whereas there may be some ambiguity as to whether the church itself is a cult, I feel that a mission is clearly a cult experience. I say that having, for the most part, liked my experience. It wasn't all that bad for me. That said, there is a lot to be said for a young person leaving the comforts of home and learning about who they are or getting outside of themselves. And honestly, a mission can be one of those opportunities. But there have to be other things that can do this as well, in addition to opportunities to render service or teach independence. Some of these opportunities might be something like joining the military or the Peace Corps. I did find an organization called Service Year. Just Google serviceyear.org. which provides opportunities to develop real-world skills through hands-on service. It can last anywhere from a few months to a year, or perhaps even a little bit more. If a student wants to take a gap year, this would be a great opportunity to be of actual service. People can work with a variety of nonprofit organizations from urban to rural communities. The benefits of a mission seem to be able to be found through other opportunities. The oft-quoted adage seems to apply here. What is good about a mission is not unique, and what is unique about a mission is not necessarily good. But what are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree with my assessment that a Mormon mission is a cult experience? What are some of your mission experiences, good or bad? Let me know down in the comments. And again, if you like what I do, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.